Good morning, everyone. Oh, that was about half of you. You could do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be here. It's a sincere privilege of myself, my wife, to once again come back and give a little report and update, and also by way of saying thank you for your faithful giving and through the years as we have pursued in missions for a little over 24 years overseas, and then now in our current role, about 4 years, highly engaged with our missionaries and activities that are taking place around the world. We're just excited that we're living in some tremendous days and thrilled that we have this wonderful opportunity where we can just spread the gospel to so many different people and continually be engaged in just different areas of fronts and ministries that we're involved in. So thank you again, Pastor Paul, for having us come. I really appreciate that. It's very so kind. And again, thank you, church, for your kind giving and faithfulness and supporting missions and our missionaries around the world and here in the U.S. I have my wife with me. Normally she sometimes travels, sometimes not, depending on the schedule, but I've got the privilege of having my wife. Gladys, would you stand up, give just a quick wave to everybody and say hello? Thank you. Thank you so much. I met my wife in Paraguay. I did a missions trip. Amazing what things can happen on a missions trip. I'll say that again. Amazing things can happen on the missions trip. I went on a missions trip a number of years ago, and I went single. And after I completed that assignment, I realized that maybe I shouldn't do this single anymore. Long story short, I met her in Paraguay, and when I was serving there, God put a call and a direction upon our lives to go to Spain. After about 3 years after we got married, we went in Spain and been serving there for all those years. So it's been an incredible journey. This year will mark 30 years of our anniversary being married. 30 years, amazing. Wow. Where does the time go? But it goes. But it's been great. It's been a wonderful journey. I got married when I was 12, but the Lord knows how to do all things. So thank you so much. So again, we're just happy for us to be here. And just want to share something that God's put in my heart. It's found in the book of Joshua. If you have your Bibles, and if not, you can follow in your app or your phone or however, or just listen. But Joshua chapter 5, we'll start reading in verse 10. A passage here that recently has kind of struck me, and I heard it via a friend of mine, and we were just kind of conversing over this. But Joshua chapter 5, verse 10, just to kind of set up the stage here, is the children of Israel were finishing the 40 years that they were in the wilderness. This is now the second generation. They're coming over and coming across into the promised land, or the land that God said he had prepared for them. So he takes them across and he brings them. They cross over the Jordan River, and this large amount, whether it's 1 million, 1.2, some say 1.5. At any rate, it was a lot of people that crossed over. The Bible says they crossed over dry land, and now they're coming into the promised land. And this was a new day, a new era. Something was getting ready to begin and to happen after the period that they spent in the wilderness. So if you read Joshua chapter 5, it says in verse 10, "Now the children of Israel camped at Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate the produce of the land the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on that very same day." In verse 12, "Then the manna ceased on that day after they had eaten the produce from the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, 'Are you for us or for our adversaries?' So he said, 'No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come.' And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped him and said to him, 'What does my Lord say to his servant?' Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, 'Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy.' And Joshua did so." Thus beginning a new era, a new venture. as they were moving, as they crossed over and they were beginning this new journey, something began to stir in the hearts of the people of Israel. And today I want to talk briefly to you about what's stirring, what's stagnant, and what's staggering. What's stirring, what's stagnant, and what is staggering. And so here through this journey, they were crossing over. Something had begun to stir in their hearts. They were standing before Jericho, some distance away. God had finally led them into the promised land. It was a new time, a new moment to move forward, to forget the past and begin to press forward. And now here they are, willing and ready and able to go. There was a sense that something was going to happen. There was a sense that God's promises were going to take place. There was a sense that things that they were wanting and desiring for so long were about to happen. They knew they could not go back to Egypt anymore. That was not an option. Nor could they be complacent in their current position. They had to move forward. Something was stirring. This is incredible. There was something about to take place. As we read in the scripture, the manna had now ceased. They were now beginning to eat from the land. They realized that things are shifting, things are changing, things aren't going to be the same anymore. And he was stirring them for this new journey. They were on a new course in this new direction, and it was necessary that they follow the stirring and this direction that God had put upon their hearts and upon their lives. This is so critical. This is so important. And I say that because how many times does the Lord put a stirring in your heart and in my heart? There's a sense at times that we feel God whispering in our ears, nudging at us, tugging at us, pulling at us ever so gently, but with a specific purpose, with a specific task. God is saying, don't do this, don't do that, look here instead, or go there instead. Think this way, consider these things. And God constantly through his word tells us, teaches us, shows us, directs us, guides us, puts this stirring in our hearts. And it's so ever so important that we follow the stirring and that we listen, we become aware. How many know that God speaks? About half of you. I'm going to go over here because I think, how many know that God speaks? God still speaks today. And he stirs and he ever so prompt, so gently, but so surely. It's so clear when we know like what God says and what he wants us to do. This stirring of the heart. The Israelites were there standing before Jericho. They knew something was stirring. They knew something was about to happen. Joshua is before the commander of the army of the Lord, and he gets this word because if you read into Joshua chapter 6, as you go into Joshua, he gets specific instructions. I love this. Specific, when they encountered Jericho, they didn't go back. They said, okay, Lord, now what? We're stirred, we've crossed over, but now what? And God speaks, because God is always faithful to speak. And he says, okay, Joshua, here is what I want you to do. For 6 days, you're going to march around one time, around Jericho. On the seventh day, you're going to march around 7 times. And after you march around 7 times, on the 7th day, you're going to blow the trumpets. The priests are going to blow the trumpets, and then everyone is going to give a shout of victory. And that's all they got. Now, sometimes when we listen and sense the stirrings of the Lord, I can't tell you how many times Gladys and I, and I'll be sharing a little later some of these stirrings, but we were stirred to get involved in different ministries in Spain and help other missionaries. They weren't our ministries. They weren't that wasn't my assignment. But as the Lord stirred us, led us, we saw the doors open. We saw incredible things happen. We saw things take place that we would have never imagined. And I often thought to myself, what would have happened if I would have pushed the stirring aside? Not listened, not obeyed, not paid attention. What would have happened if, as we sense the Lord, and he knows how to communicate to you, and he knows how to communicate to me. Believe me, he has our numbers. And he knows which button to dial, and he's got some of you on speed dial. And when he stirs, don't push it away. Listen, press in, linger a little longer, ask him more questions, but be willing to obey and keep your heart and your life open. Because the Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9, I have not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared to those who love him. The things that God has prepared. God, when he stirs, it's because he's preparing. He goes ahead preparing. God doesn't just stir or just doesn't get our attention with no reason, but it's for a reason, for a specific task, for something that he wants to do. So my question to you this morning is God stirring something in your heart today? Listen to his voice. Remove distractions. Push away obstacles. And let God's plans move on your behalf. Let him move on your behalf. But you know, human nature is human nature. And sometimes God stirs, but we don't see anything happen. Sometimes we feel like, okay, and we want to, tomorrow let it happen. Sometimes we've seen God will move quick, and then sometimes God moves slow. Sometimes it's quick, it's fast, or we would say in Spanish, rápido. Did I say that right? Great. And then sometimes it's just a slow, but it does not mean he's not moving. Remember, God's timetable is a little bit different than ours. We've got to learn to trust him. We've got to learn to be patient. We've got to learn sometimes to just wait in the presence of the Lord, believing, trusting, acknowledging, hoping, knowing that what God says he'll do, he'll do. And so there's this times where we sit there, we wonder, God is stirring, but I don't see anything happen. And it appears that things become stagnant. Now I can imagine as the children of Israel were walking around Jericho for 6 days, walking around once, they were wondering, we're supposed to conquer this city. Great. We're walking around this city once every day for 6 days. Wonderful. It appears very, very stagnant. This is not a military tactic that you would read in anyone's military books. This is not the way that would seem to be the most successful. It appears that we are wasting time. But remember, God is always in charge of time. We're not. He's the keeper of time. And we can trust him. And so as they were going around wondering, nothing is really happening. This appears to be stagnant. Where is the might of the Lord? Where is the justice of the Lord? Where is God moving? How come we don't see him? There's 101 things we can say is going wrong. And yet God seems to be silent. And it seems so stagnant. But it does not mean that he is not at work. Because many times in what would appear to be for us something that is stagnant, something that is not moving, God is always moving. God is always moving. He speaks to us. Sometimes he speaks to us here, and then what he does is he goes into our future, prepares the way so that those periods of stagnation is not really stagnation, they're periods of preparation where God prepares and we just have to trust and know that God is working on our behalf. They're difficult. They're difficult times. They're times where we sometimes struggle. We want to see things moving faster. But God knows how to move best. It's funny. God never moves ahead of us or behind us. He always moves with us. Trust the Lord in periods of stagnation. Now, this is interesting because in our new role that we're serving now, and it was March of last year, I did my last mobilization training for our missionaries to itinerate. the second week of March. We do it every year, second week of March, second week of October. Brand new missionaries. We had a full room of different missionaries there, brand new coming in, teaching them on the techniques and do's and don'ts of itineration, fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. The following week, everything shut down. Everything closed down. This is March of 2020. I'm sure you're all aware of what happened. And so now what we had to make changes. We had to, but in this last year, this is interesting. This last year, we had as many as missionaries, brand new, go to the field that we had in 2019, 2018, 2017. In other words, it should have been a stagnant year, should have been a reduced number. It wasn't. God was still working. When we think it's stagnant, it's not so. It's God saying, hey, I'm still going to work through this. How many know that God can work through stagnation? How many know that God works through stagnation? How many know that God can give us the grace and the fortitude to say, God, I'm hanging on here and I'm not going to give up. So we don't lose in despair. We don't lose in discouragement. We don't become paralyzed in these periods of stagnation. And so that's what happened. And that's incredible. If you read 6 days are going around, and then Joshua chapter 6, read down to verse 20, it says here, it's amazing. And the first phrase there, it says, and it happened, talking about when they blew the trumpets and when they began to shout. After going around 6 days, and the seventh day, 7 times around, they blew the trumpets and they shouted. And then it says on 6:20, Joshua 6:20, and it happened. What happened? The walls came down, as God said was going to happen. They had to follow it and do it His way, not their way. They had to understand that God's ways are better than man's ways. They had to understand how important it is to follow the Lord and trust and to lean upon the Lord and not your own understanding. Hello? And this is what it means. God was moving. Even when it appeared to be stagnant, God was moving. And it happened. The walls came down. Amazing. Amazing. So don't give up. Keep marching. Keep believing. Keep trusting. Keep worshiping. Keep the faith. Walk in faith. Don't regress. Progress. And believing that God is able to do immeasurably more. Even when we can't see what God is doing, it does not mean He's not doing anything. I've learned, and we've learned, Gladys and I, to trust the Lord. Breakthroughs do come, and they will come. And when they do, oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Let me continue to move on here. When they saw the walls go down and now they crossed over into more into the promised land, had a great victory. Then it became pretty staggering for them. And that staggering that it was just, there was one, but there were many cities after that. There was a large amount of territory. The job wasn't quite finished with just conquering one city. There was much more. As tremendous a victory as it was, but there was much more. So it appeared to be staggering that, wow, there's still a whole lot more left to do. There's still a whole lot that we're waiting for God to do. There's still a whole lot ahead of us than there even is behind us. And when it comes to a point where it appears to be staggering, we have to understand Galatians 6:9 when it says, do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap when we do not lose heart. There are more Jerichos to conquer. There are more. Because God has more for us. And when you think it's staggering, I remember when we first went to Spain and we were planting churches there, it was more than hard. We did prayer and fastings like crazy. 10 days, sometimes 15 days, just God, when, in situations that seemed to be immovable. And then all of a sudden, what appeared to be staggering became possible. And God opened doors and allowed us to go through. And over, God showed us ways how we could conquer the impossibility. So what may be staggering with God is simply possible for him. Very possible. Very possible. Don't lose hope. Don't lose faith in what appears to be staggering. I know there's challenges today. There are still uncertainties. There are many questions, and there are concerns. But what is God saying to you? What does God say to his word? What does he say? What does he say? And believe with all of your heart that he can do what he says. I want to show you something really quick here. I have a quick PowerPoint that I'd like to show you. Recently this has happened, and it's kind of what was taking place when we were in Spain, but continues to take place even today. So I've got this next slide here. What is stirring? Back in a number of years ago, when we started the first church in Madrid, it was a brand new work. It was very difficult to start. It started, thank God, it launched, went forward. One of the strategies we had as a church was, because it was difficult to acquire a large facility, we said, well, let's get a decent facility, and then let's start these home groups all around the city. Start planting these home groups. And we started to plant home groups in and around the city where there wasn't a church, and that was many, many places, by the way. But we started these home groups, one, and then we started another one. We said, well, one of these home groups, okay, and this is a picture of it, that as it began, it started in an apartment, and then it went from an apartment, because they got too many people, to a small storefront location. It was still a home group, but as it continued to grow, the pastors realized, well, this has got to be a church now. So when they decided to become a church, the pastors that were going to be the pastor of this small home group, they contacted us, Gladys and I, and said, hey, would you come and help us? Would you come serve with us? We need your help. Now, at the time, I was serving as an area director for Southern Europe. I had 8 countries and about 120 missionaries that I gave oversight. So I had something to do every day, okay? I had something to do. So they asked us, and when they did, my first impression was, I've got a couple things on my list to do. We're kind of ready managing our area, so I wasn't necessarily looking for more. But there's this stirring that came in our hearts that we should help them. A stirring came, a sense of, you really shouldn't say no, but you should consider what I am asking you and your wife to do. The Lord was speaking to us, and we had this stirring that we should follow and enter into this church and help them move forward. So we said yes. When we said yes, the first thing we had to do was find a new location. So the next slide, we moved, got out of that place, and we found this. It was an old wood shop filled with dust and dirt and everything. And this is the only thing that became available. The next slide, we have here, this is what the inside looked like. We had to get rid of all this old wood and sawdust. I never knew dust had so many classifications, but we had all of them in this place. And it was like, wow, we worked, and after that we worked some more. And then the next slide, when it was all said and done, that's what the place looked like. It's clean, painted, new floor, etc. We said, great, wonderful. Then we began to have services. As we were having services, more people came. We started with a Sunday evening service to start off with, then it went to a Sunday morning service. And then during that time, next slide, something began to happen in our Sunday morning services, and even God began to really, really move in the church. It was maybe 2 years old at the time, maybe 2.5, no more than that. And all of a sudden, boom, something happened People were, we had our songs prepared and 4 songs maybe or so. And then people were still worshiping. They continued to worship even more. And then I remember one service, I don't know how, because we never taught them this. All of a sudden we were worshiping and things were going, and all of a sudden there was these people like coming around in front of the altar area, and they were going around our church, going around on the inside. They were doing this, they called it a Jericho march. And I thought, well, who taught them how to do that? There was so much excitement, so much energy. And we said, my goodness, God was beginning to move in an it totally surprised us. And the church kept growing. And it kept growing. And it kept growing. So we thought, okay, this is great. It's time to look for another place. And at that point, we went to 2 Sunday morning services and a Sunday evening service. And then we had to go to 3 Sunday morning and the evening. I mean, thank God the fire marshal never came to church and visited with us. Anyway, the things you can get away with, let's leave it like that. So the next slide here, and I love all those people. The next slide. Okay, so now we realized we got to get another place. And so we found this location here, this new location. We thought, great, wonderful. We talked with the owner. And the owner, he asked us, well, in their conversations, well, who are you guys? And we said, well, we're a church. He says, a church? Yeah, we're an evangelical church. His response was, he says, the church doesn't have money. There's no way. So he cut off all negotiation, and we really liked this place. And we thought, this place would have been wonderful. You can tell it had, 3 floors. We could, put the children there, and on top our administrative. I mean, and in the main sanctuary, this is perfect. And in the city. And the guy said no to us because we were a church. So we kept looking and searching and searching. 6 months went by, 8 months went by. You talk about a period of stagnation. Because it seemed, the church we were packed, we were asked. It was an incredible time, frustrating time, very frustrating. We entered into a period of stagnation. We praying, saying, God, why doesn't it open? A year went by. And then all of a sudden, the original owners called us back and said, hey, are you guys still interested in this? And he said, well, wait a minute. You told us we couldn't. He says, well, listen, we were going to sell to someone else, but, we find out that they were involved in some mafia negotiations. It was in the newspaper. It was in the press. So the owner backed out immediately, was all embarrassed. And he remembers to call the people with no money. How does that happen? Of all the people I'm sure because real estate was hot at the time, of all the people, he remembers to call, you talk about irony, to call the people with no money. So we enter back into negotiation. We reduced the price even more. We got a great deal. We had 6 months free. We didn't have to make any payments. And we started working and developing. And then on the inauguration day, we had an inauguration day about several months, 6 or so months after. So the next slide, there we go. That's great. That's the place on the inside. It's complete. That's the inauguration day. It's packed with people. I mean, there's such a joy, celebration. And we realized, man, the Lord did it. The Lord did it. Even to get into this place, we had to raise some money. I remember I went to the church. We did a special offering some Sunday evening. We raised over 42,000 euros in one evening. I mean, it was a miracle. People gave their time. It was an incredible how God moved. But he was building our faith during the stagnation period. We learned that lesson. And it was incredible what was taking place. And then during this phase, we couldn't really grow further, so we went to multiple services. And then we started, again, starting up home groups in different parts of the city. At the time, the church had like 3 home groups, then went to 4, then 5. In the last 2 years, it's 6, and then 7. And then it got up to 8. And then last year, another home group started. They were meeting literally outside in the park. Of course, they met in the home, but it got too small. An apartment, it got too small. Then they're meeting now in a park. They're outside. We're looking, they're looking, they're asking, and all of a sudden they come up to this property here, which it's where we used to live in Spain here. We used to have, it used to be a restaurant and a coffee shop, and I remember having several meetings in there. This property, after it was a restaurant, then it closed several years ago, and then another business wanted to come in and have a undesirable business there. Let's put it to you this way. A very undesirable business. Well, people were complaining, some of the town, and then myself and another missionary and some students, because there was a Christian school there, we literally stood on that sidewalk right there. And we were praying that this place would not become this undesirable business that they wanted to make. And I remember we were standing there, the main streets behind us, with our hands towards the building several years ago, with our hands toward the building, and we said, Lord, may someday this place become a church. We literally may someday this place become a church, because God knows how to move your stagnation into some very staggering moments. And this is what's staggering about this. This has happened last month. We knocked on the government, I'm going to say ayuntamiento, the mayor's office. There it is. We knocked on the mayor's office, and we said, we want this place for a church. Now, it may seem common to hear that here, but it's a little not too common in Spain. And there were other businesses, there were other restaurant owners that were knocking on the door to acquire, because the location is spectacular. Do you know there's a bus stop right in front there? There's a bus stop there. It's the main road. If you go the other way into Madrid, I mean, it's incredible. And here we are standing in line saying, Mr. Mayor, we want this place to be a church. After negotiations and more negotiations and conversations and more conversations. Did I say we had conversations? Anyway, we had a lot. June 3rd, we signed a contract for this place to become a church. Unbelievable. And the new church that was just a home group, that now will become a church shortly here, a home group. All this was during this COVID period, where, if you remember, maybe some of you don't, but in 2020, Spain was hit really, really hard with COVID, really hard. They were lockdowns. If you lived in one neighborhood, you had to have permission to go to another city. You couldn't just go back and forth. I mean, there were huge fines. They were really trying to, and during this whole period, this home group started, developed. June 3rd, we signed. And this place will now, when we become a church, we'll make our plans to go over there with your inauguration service once that is set. But I'm just saying how incredible the things God does, how staggering the thing God does. When we don't lose hope, when we don't lose faith, when we don't give up, when we don't surrender, when we hear the promptings, the stirrings of the Lord, we follow, we listen, we obey, we pursue. And then in the periods of stagnation, we don't give up, we don't complain. Sorry, I had to say, that just came out, sorry. But, don't we complain? Not one aim. Okay, great. I must be on time. It's human nature. It's okay. God gets it. But also, you can complain, but still believe. Still trust. Still follow. And say, Lord, help me with my unbelief. Help me, Lord, with my discouragement. Because when the Lord does something, as I read in Joshua chapter 6, verse 20, and it happened, it will be staggering. It will be staggering. And you'll say, wow, look what the Lord has done. So today, my friend, that is my story. But what is your story? There are more Jerichos yet to conquer. There's more territory yet to cover. All of us, and I say all of us, kindly and humbly and with a heart of compassion, in one way or another, have been affected by this past season that we all were living in. I get it. It's affected sometimes some of our jobs and some of our situations, maybe even financially. Maybe we've lost family members. And God knows it, but God may still be stirring at your heart. God may still be saying, hey, friend, I've got something left for you to do. And through the struggles of stagnation, if we trust Him and if we stay on the course, we will be staggered beyond imagination to see what the Lord will do. And you will be so amazed and say, wow, look what the Lord has done.
We hope that you enjoyed today's service. Let's take a moment to talk about your next steps. If you made the decision to follow Jesus today, hey, we love to celebrate with you and help you on your journey. Simply text the word follower to 97000. You'll receive helpful resources on following Jesus. If you're looking to get better connected at our church, then your next step is to sign up for LifeTrack. LifeTrack helps you discover your purpose and learn more about our church. You can do this through our website or app. Once again, thank you for watching, but we love to see you in person next week.